My friends, what I have behind me is Best Buy's most popular gaming PC that is pre-built. Now, there are a lot of reasons why you should never consider picking up this PC, which I'll get into, but then there's also a couple reasons why you should, and we'll talk about all of that after we talk about today's video sponsor. But friends, today's video is sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant allows you to engage and understand concepts in the realms of math, science, computer science, general logic in a way that is masterfully story told, but also in a way that keeps you coming back for more in a very addictive, interactive experience. As I mentioned, they have wide-ranging topics such as mathematic fundamentals to quantitative finance, to introduction to neural networks, to cryptocurrency. Those last two kind of key on my mind, especially as we're moving into the AI age. Machine learning, something that everybody should really have a fundamental concept of, as well as cryptocurrency for obvious reasons. So Brilliant makes this fun by allowing you to understand the concepts and then apply them. They believe that effective learning is active, so they make it so that you're solving fun, interactive problems by yourself. So whether it is learning about neural networks or data structures or programming with Python, you're going to want to continue to use Brilliant on a daily basis simply because it makes it fun for you to learn. So go to the link in the video description, brilliant.org/UFD Tech, and sign up for Brilliant for free. But the first 200 of you that use that link can get 20% off the annual premium subscription from Brilliant. It's free to use it, but you can also upgrade to the annual premium membership if you're so inclined. So let me set the stage for you for this CyberPower PC Gamer Master Gaming PC. It currently is going in and out of stock on Best Buy because it is so popular for the price tag of $750. But what does that get you? Well, not as much as it would have a couple months ago, but it's actually kind of better than the open market right now. So you get a Ryzen 5 5600, a B450 gigabyte motherboard, 8 gigabytes of memory, an AMD RX 580, a 240 gig SSD, plus a 2 terabyte hard drive, all wrapped inside this custom CyberPower PC case. Now, if you add up all of those parts on the open market, not even including Windows, not even including time of assembly, you're looking at $768 on just buying everything yourself as opposed to picking it up from Best Buy. So automatically, this looks like a good financial deal. But there are a lot of things that I take issue with this PC on that. They could have done a lot better and brought a better end user experience that would have made it a much more compelling argument without actually costing more money. So let's start with the pros of the build. Number one, the unboxing experience, super smooth. Everything's laid out where you need it to be. All of the cables inside were plugged in where they were supposed to go. The single RAM stick is plugged in the correct slot, as well as having a sticker that allows you to know that you are not supposed to plug your monitor display into the one on the motherboard, but rather the one on the graphics card. All super helpful stuff. As I mentioned, there is an SSD as well as a hard drive, but thankfully the boot setup is actually set to the SSD. And as I mentioned before, the pricing is actually quite reasonable for what you could expect to pay if you were going to build this yourself. And it has a couple neat little features, like the fact that this is very clearly a Phanteks P300A mesh case, but they have a custom designed front plate that actually has the CyberPower logo cut into the mesh as opposed to the standard Phanteks way of doing it. All that's kind of like appreciable, good stuff. There's plenty of room for upgrades, 4 RAM slots on the motherboard, an M.2 slot if you so wish, as well as having a pretty decent 600 watt power supply in case you want to go up another step on the graphics card. Overall, the pre-built, as I'm kind of just generally talking about it, sounds enticing, but there are, again, few issues that I need to bring up. Number one, there is thermal paste all over the cooler. I don't know who did this, how they did it. They clearly got thermal paste on their hands and then they spread it on the cooler. Boy. I thought it was like a silver ring around the actual CPU cooler. No, my friends, that wipes off. That is somebody's excess sludge that made its way onto the PC, which obviously I can excuse. All of that kind of stuff happens. But then, as I mentioned, there is one stick of RAM in there. We all know it is a very clear, understood thing in the PC gaming community that AMD Ryzen CPUs, especially the Ryzen 5 3600, benefit tremendously from having dual channel RAM, which means means having RAM either in the second and fourth slot or the first and third. You're actually losing out on performance by not having a second stick of RAM. You don't have to go to 16 gigs. You can get two 4 gig sticks, but that would have allowed for much better performance. And we'll talk about how much more when I get to the benchmarks. My next issue is still also with the RAM. While it does say on the box and on the website that it is 3000 megahertz, they don't actually enable XMP right out of the gate, and there is no giant sticker right on the box allowing you to know that you need to enable the faster memory settings in the BIOS before you actually boot up your PC. So from stone cold boot to actually playing video games, you're running at the motherboard standard of 2667 megahertz, regardless of the fact that you may have paid extra because you thought you were getting 3000 megahertz. Add on that, I also think that a 240 gig boot drive with a 2 terabyte hard drive is actually a worse split than a 500 gig hard drive and a 1 terabyte storage drive, because I personally believe that you should store as much on an SSD as possible and really not keep as much around if you're not actively using it. It's a bit excusable, but I also think it's the wrong way to kind of build this. But let's go ahead and get into the benchmarks. The Fantex P300A case actually did pretty good at keeping everything cool. It's not like we have a ton of beefy components in here. The Ryzen 5 3600 and the RX 580 stayed at modest temperatures. The GPU only hit 74 degrees Celsius, whereas the CPU did 63. And considering the fact that we're using what looks to be a bastardized stock cooler from AMD, it's probably okay for whatever purposes you're gonna end up using it for. Now let's talk video games. Since it is an RX 580 in this PC, I decided to test everything at 1080p because that's where this card performs the best, as well as at high settings because that's what it's typically enabled for. And for the most part, in a lot of games, we're seeing right around 60 FPS. There are certain games like Cyberpunk, which only got 30 FPS right out of the gate. There are some optimizations that are out there in case you want to tweak it to get better FPS, but besides Cyberpunk, everything else was around 45 and up, including Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But as I mentioned, you are losing performance by only having a single stick of RAM, and those benchmarks that I just mentioned to you would be what the end consumer would get out of the box. I did not set the XMP memory profile, I just ran it at the stock memory configuration. Upping the RAM speed to that 3000 megahertz actually gave us about a 1 to 3% increase in most games. Some games didn't benefit from the RAM change at all, like Crysis Remastered or Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Those stayed nearly identical, but we saw the largest gain in Horizon Zero Dawn, where we saw a 3.6% increase over just the stock. Now for the next testing, to just kind of prove how much performance you're actually losing out on when it comes to have a single stick of memory versus 2 sticks, I picked up the only 2x4 gigabyte kit that I had lying around. This is a 2x4 gigabyte kit of G.Skill Ripjaws 5 at 2666 megahertz. I actually don't have a kit that's 3000 megahertz, but even though this is slower RAM, and I just showed you that with faster RAM you could get a 3% performance increase, just by splitting the RAM into 2 sticks and keeping the 8 gigabyte amount, we actually saw a performance increase of up to 5% in some games, with Death Stranding benefiting the most, but then other games like Horizon Zero Dawn, Red Dead Redemption 2, and Witcher 3 all seeing plus a 4% increase. Again, games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider didn't see any change, neither did Cyberpunk, but it's very clear that even though this is an 8 gigabyte of memory gaming PC, this is not the best 8 gigabyte of memory gaming PC that you could possibly get. The specs that are put on this, number 1, don't happen out of the box, and then number 2, aren't optimized, even though it wouldn't be a larger financial contribution for them to go for 2 4 gigabyte sticks as opposed to the 1 8 gigabyte stick. The only thing that could potentially cost them is the man hours to actually implement the second stick, and then also probably some sort of quality control setup where you have to make sure both sticks are operating. So it might add more in the labor department, but then you're making it so that your consumers are missing out on 5 to 7% of performance that they otherwise could have had without them knowing the difference between the spec sheets that are actually put on Best Buy's website, because that's one of the things that I looked for. Did it mention whether or not it was in dual channel RAM? Did it mention that it was a single stick? And it does not. It actually just says 8 gigs of memory, and there are 4 memory slots on the website. And that leads to kind of a user experience where people don't know the full story of what they're buying until they actually unbox it or they look at other reviews that people are doing. CyberPower has created a pretty decently valued PC here that's being sold at Best Buy, but you're getting a worse experience than you can otherwise get if they were just more clear about how things are. Now, this does allow you to upgrade to 16 gigs a bit easier and still retain dual channel, but if they did 2x4 gigabyte sticks, you could just get 2 more 4 gigabyte sticks and have that 16 gigabytes of RAM and still retain dual channel. Overall, it's a pretty good valued system compared to other things you can get on the market, but it's a bit underhanded to not fully disclose the way the specifications are laid out, especially when it comes to losing performance. Somebody who buys a 2x4 gigabyte PC versus a 1x8 gigabyte PC will see better performance on their PC versus what CyberPower has constructed here and what Best Buy is selling. All I would ask is that there's an extra space on the website where they actually denote how many RAM sticks come with the PC rather than just the total amount that is included or the total amount of RAM slots. Let us know how many are occupied so that we can make a better decision about what type of performance are we getting out of this PC and do we have to make any end user upgrades in order to get the maximum value out of this. So overall, it's not a bad PC, especially in the times right now where PC parts are limited. It does seem like an RX 580 is somehow a really good buy at this point in 2021. I can't believe I'm saying that. I started my channel right around the time the 480 came out, and we're still on the exact same Polaris generation. It's absolutely crazy where the PC world has gone. But in case you are looking for a pre-built PC, honestly, this is well constructed. You're not gonna do a better value by just buying everything brand new yourself. So it's hard to not recommend as long as you're okay with, as I mentioned, the fact that it's only got a single 8 gigabyte stick of RAM, the fact that it only has a 240 gig SSD, a WD green at that, and also the fact that you might have to do some tweaking in the BIOS yourself to get the maximum performance out of your computer. So that's gonna wrap up this video on CyberPower's GamerMaster pre-built PC, the most popular gaming PC that I could find on Best Buy at the moment when I ordered. Let me know what you think of it down below in the comments. Have you picked up one of these for yourself with differing specs? I want to hear from you and your experience overall, especially if you've had to return it. What's the Best Buy return/repair process? How's that gone for you? I want to know more all about that. And with that being said, I'm Brett with the UFD Tech channel. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it. Get subscribed to UFD Tech for more PC videos, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.